Welcome back to Ab Immemorabile. I'm Drake.
And I'm Holly. For anyone new, Latin for from time beyond memory.
Which is fitting for today's episode, actually.
It really is. We're going back to the beginning, or at least one of the beginnings.
The birth of philosophy.
That moment when humanity started thinking differently about the world, when we stopped asking who and started asking why.
I've been looking forward to this one. It's foundational to everything else we explore on this podcast.
Because before this moment, for hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived inside myth. The world was alive with gods and spirits. Every storm, every sunrise, every death had a who behind it.
Then, in one small corner of the Mediterranean, in one brief century, everything changed.
A handful of Greeks started asking different questions. Not who sent the storm, but what causes storms. Not which god makes the sun rise, but how the sun actually works.
They rejected the stories that had sustained humanity since consciousness began.
And we're still living with the consequences, both the gifts and the losses.
So today we're exploring why that happened, what it gave us, and what it cost us.
Let's start with what came before.
Because I think most of us struggle to really imagine what consciousness was like before philosophy emerged.
We read myths and we think of them as stories, entertaining tales, maybe containing some symbolic wisdom if we dig deep enough.
But that's not how they functioned. Not at all.
No, for the people who lived inside them, myths weren't stories about the world. They were the world. They were reality itself.
Think about what that actually means. When a Greek farmer looked at the sky and saw storm clouds gathering, he wasn't observing meteorological phenomena.
He was witnessing divine activity. Zeus was angry, or Zeus was blessing the earth with rain, or Zeus was sending a message that needed to be interpreted.
And this wasn't a belief he held alongside other beliefs. It wasn't something he could question or doubt. It wasn't like modern religious belief where you believe despite lack of evidence.
It was perception itself. He literally saw the god acting, the same way you and I see clouds and rain.
This is what scholars call mythological consciousness, or sometimes embedded consciousness. You're not separate from the cosmos looking at it from outside. You're woven into it. A thread in the great tapestry.
And every thread is connected to every other thread. There's no separation between the natural and the supernatural, between the human world and the divine world.
Think about Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. We approach them as literature now. Foundational texts of Western civilization. Beautiful poetry, epic narratives.
Characters we can analyze and interpret. Themes we can discuss in university seminars.
But for the Greeks who first heard these works performed, they were something else entirely. They were reality being spoken, truth being revealed by the muse through Homer's voice.
When Homer describes Athena intervening in battle, guiding a spear to its target, protecting her favorite hero, the original audience didn't understand this as metaphor or poetic license.
Athena actually did that. The goddess herself, present and active in the human world, as real as the spear, as real as the blood, as real as the hero she protected.
And here's what's crucial. This wasn't limited to dramatic moments. The gods weren't just present during storms and battles and the great events of history.
They were present everywhere, all the time. Every spring had its nymph. Every grove had its spirit. Every household had its protecting deities watching over the family.
The world was alive, animated, full of presence and meaning at every level.
When you poured a libation before a meal, you weren't performing an empty ritual out of social obligation. You were maintaining relationship with powers that genuinely affected your life.
When you observed the proper festivals, you weren't just following tradition for tradition's sake. You were participating in the cosmic order, helping to keep the world running properly.
The ancient Egyptians believed that if the proper rituals weren't performed, the sun might not rise. That's how connected human action was to cosmic function.
This is so different from how we experience reality that it's almost impossible to grasp from inside modern consciousness.
We can understand it intellectually. We can read about it in anthropology books, but we can't feel it.
Right, we can't actually experience the world as unsouled, as alive with divine presence the way our ancestors did for hundreds of thousands of years.
And this wasn't just Greek. This was universal. Every human culture we know of lived this way until very recently in historical terms.
The Aboriginal Dreamtime in Australia. The ancestors didn't just live in the past, they're still present in the landscape. Every rock and waterhole and sacred site is a place where the dreaming breaks through into ordinary reality.
The Aboriginal understanding is that the world was sung into being by ancestral beings, and those songs still hold it in existence. The land is literally made of story.
The Norse understanding of fate woven by the Norns, your destiny isn't something that might happen. It's already real, already existing in the fabric of things, waiting to unfold.
Even the gods are subject to fate in Norse mythology. Odin himself knows that Ragnarok is coming, and he prepares for it while knowing he cannot prevent it.
The Egyptian cosmos maintained by Ma'at. Truth, justice, and cosmic order aren't abstract concepts. Ma'at is a goddess, and the pharaoh's job is to maintain her in the world through proper ritual and right action.
When the pharaoh fails, chaos enters the world. Isfet, the opposite of Ma'at. Real, tangible disorder that affects the crops, the river, everything.
The Celtic world of the Tuatha De Danann, where the boundary between the human world and the other world is thin and permeable, especially at certain times and places.
All of it operating on the same fundamental assumption. The world is alive with personified forces. Meaning isn't something humans create or project. It's something we receive. Something built into the structure of reality itself.
And importantly, this framework answered every question a human being might ask.
Why did my crops fail this year? You offended a god. Or your neighbor cursed you. Or the land spirits are displeased because something wasn't done properly.
Why did my child die? The fates decreed it. Or a jealous deity struck the child down. Or you neglected a required sacrifice and now the price is being exacted.
Why does the sun rise every morning? Because Helios drives his chariot across the sky. Because Ra sails his boat through the heavens. Because that's the order the gods established at the beginning of time.
Why do seasons change? Because Persephone descends to the underworld and her mother Demeter mourns. Because the cosmic dance between darkness and light continues eternally.
Every question has an answer, and every answer involves a who, a personified being with intentions and desires and character.
And crucially, this means there's always something you can do about your situation. You're not helpless.
Make an offering, perform a ritual, consult an oracle, seek the intervention of a more powerful deity who might intercede on your behalf.
You're not facing an indifferent universe. You're a participant in an ongoing drama. And, like any drama, the outcome can be influenced by the actors.
This is crucial for understanding why mythology persisted for so long. It worked. It provided everything people needed to make sense of their existence.
Explanation for the puzzling aspects of life. Meaning for suffering. Community through shared practice. Practical guidance for daily decisions. Emotional resonance with the great themes of existence. Connection to something eternal.
For thousands upon thousands of years, mythological consciousness served humanity well. It wasn't broken. It didn't need fixing.
Then something changed. In one small corner of the Mediterranean, in one brief century, a handful of people started asking different questions.
The Milesians, Thales and his students, around the 6th century BCE.
And I want to pause here because it's almost impossible to overstate how strange this was.
How unprecedented in human history. Nothing like this had ever happened before.
Imagine you're living in Miletus around 600 BCE. It's a prosperous Greek colony on the coast of what's now Turkey. One of the wealthiest cities in the Greek world.
A major trading hub, ships coming and going constantly. From Egypt, from Phoenicia, from Babylon, from the Black Sea, from every corner of the known world.
Merchants and sailors and travelers bringing goods, but also bringing ideas, stories, different ways of seeing the world.
You've been exposed to dozens of different mythological systems. Egyptian gods, Babylonian gods, Greek gods, Persian gods, Phoenician gods.
Merchants telling stories around harbour fires, travelers sharing the beliefs of distant lands, priests from different traditions, all claiming to know the truth.
All of them claiming to explain the same phenomena. All of them contradicting each other on the details. All of them certain that their version is correct.
Ah, that's interesting, isn't it? When you only have one mythology, you can't see it as mythology. It's just how things are. It's just reality.
But when you encounter multiple mythologies, something shifts in consciousness. A crack appears.
you start to notice they're all doing the same thing, explaining why the sun rises, why the Nile floods, why earthquakes happen, why people get sick and die.
The Egyptians say the sun is Ra sailing across the sky. The Greeks say it's Helios driving his chariot. The Babylonians have their own story. The Persians, another.
And they can't all be literally true. The Egyptian account of the sun crossing the sky and the Greek account can't both be accurate descriptions of reality.
So maybe neither is accurate.
Maybe they're all stories, human creations rather than divine revelations.
Once you've had that thought, you can't unhave it. The spell is broken.
This is the context for Thales, a wealthy merchant probably, certainly an educated man with wide exposure to different cultures and their beliefs.
We don't have his writings directly. Everything we know comes through later sources, primarily Aristotle writing about 2 centuries after Thales lived.
But the basic claim attributed to him is stunning in its implications.
Water. Everything is water.
Now that sounds ridiculous to modern ears. Obviously everything isn't water. Look around you. Rocks, air, fire, wood, clearly not water.
But that's completely missing the point. That's evaluating his answer when what matters is his question.
What Thales was doing is asking, what is the world made of? What's the fundamental stuff underlying all the apparent diversity we see?
A what question instead of a who question.
An impersonal principle instead of a personified cause.
And he was willing to argue about it, to give reasons for his claim, to consider objections and respond to them.
Why water? Apparently Thales observed that water is essential for life, that it can exist as solid, liquid, or vapor, that it seems to be present everywhere in some form.
Not a bad argument, actually. Wrong, but not bad. It's an attempt to explain diversity through unity based on observation and reasoning.
This is the birth of philosophy. Not a specific doctrine about water or anything else, but a method, a way of approaching reality through questioning and reasoning rather than receiving and accepting.
Think about what Thales is implicitly claiming. He's saying that he, a mere human being, can figure out the nature of reality through his own thinking.
Not through divine revelation, not through sacred tradition handed down from the ancestors, not through the authority of priests or poets who speak for the gods.
Through observation and reasoning, using the equipment every human being possesses. The capacity to look, to think, to question, to argue.
That's an astonishing claim. It's essentially saying that the truth isn't hidden or reserved for special people. It's available to anyone who thinks carefully enough.
His student Anaximander took it further. Anaximander couldn't accept that water was the fundamental substance.
Because water seems to be one thing among many. It can become steam or ice, yes, but it also interacts with other elements. It can be opposed by fire. How can water be truly fundamental if it changes and depends on other things?
So Anaximander proposed what he called the apeiron, the boundless, the unlimited.
Something that isn't any particular thing, that has no specific qualities we can perceive directly, but from which all particular things emerge and to which they all return.
Now that's genuinely abstract thinking, a concept that can't be perceived through the senses, but must be reasoned toward. You can't see or touch the apeiron. You can only think it.
The apeiron is infinite, eternal, and the source of everything, not a god, not a person, a principle.
And Anaximander went further still. He proposed that the Earth floats in space, held in place not by pillars or by Atlas's shoulders, but by equilibrium.
It doesn't fall because there's no reason for it to fall in any particular direction. It's equidistant from everything, so it stays where it is.
That's extraordinary. He's reasoning about cosmology without any reference to mythological entities. Pure physics, essentially.
He also proposed that life originated in the sea and gradually moved onto land, that humans descended from fish-like creatures. In the 6th century BCE,
Anaximenes, the third of the great Milesians, proposed air as the fundamental substance. Air that becomes fire when it rarefies and thins out, water when it condenses, earth when it condenses further.
Still looking for a physical substance as the foundation of everything, but developing the argument, showing how one thing could transform into many things through natural processes of expansion and contraction.
The specifics of their answers almost don't matter from our perspective. What matters is that they're debating, reasoning, building on each other's ideas, critiquing, refining.
Anaximander learned from Thales and then disagreed with him. Anaximenes learned from Anaximander and then disagreed with him.
This is completely new. In mythological consciousness, you don't argue with the stories. They come from the gods, from the ancestors, from sources beyond human questioning.
But philosophy invites questioning, demands it, actually. If you can't give reasons for your claims, if you can't defend them against objections, your claims don't count.
And this changes everything about what it means to be human.
Let's trace this through carefully. Because the implications are vast and we're still living with them.
Before philosophy, you're embedded in a meaningful cosmos. You receive truth from authoritative sources outside yourself. You participate in reality rather than observing it from a distance.
The self isn't sharply distinguished from the world. You're part of the great web of being, a node in the network.
After philosophy, something fundamental shifts. You're now separated from the cosmos. You observe it from outside. You investigate it as an object to be studied.
The self becomes something that stands apart from nature, a thinking subject examining an external world.
And this is both liberation and exile.
Liberation because you're no longer bound by inherited stories. You can think for yourself, question authority, imagine alternatives.
You can disagree with your culture, your family, your priests, your rulers. You have an independent standpoint from which to evaluate claims and judge for yourself.
That's incredibly powerful. It's the foundation of science, of democracy, of individual rights, of every progressive movement in history.
But it's also exile. Because you've lost your home in the cosmos. You're now a stranger in a strange land, looking at it from outside.
The world is no longer alive with presence and meaning. It's become an object, something to be studied and manipulated rather than participated in and loved.
The German sociologist Max Weber called this the disenchantment of the world, the process by which modern civilization progressively stripped nature of its spiritual significance.
The forest stops being a place where spirits dwell and becomes timber, resources, raw material for human purposes. Bored feet?
The storm stops being Zeus and becomes weather. Interesting, perhaps. Dangerous, certainly, but not meaningful in itself, not speaking to us.
The stars stop being divine beings or signs from the gods and become balls of gas burning according to physical laws trillions of miles away.
And here's what I think we often miss. This disenchantment wasn't an accident. It wasn't an unfortunate side effect of philosophical progress.
In many ways, it was the point.
The early philosophers wanted to get the gods out of the picture, not because they were atheists in the modern sense, but because they recognized something important.
As long as you explain everything through divine intervention, you can't actually understand anything.
If Zeus sends the storm, there's nothing more to investigate. The explanation is complete. You can only propitiate Zeus and hope for the best.
But if the storm is a natural phenomenon with natural causes, then you can study it, analyze it, eventually predict it.
Maybe even control it. And that's power. Real power over nature that mythology could never provide.
This is the bargain Western civilization made. Trade meaning for power.
Trade participation for manipulation.
Trade being at home in the cosmos for being master of it.
And we've been living with the consequences ever since.
Now, I want to zoom out for a moment because something remarkable was happening. This wasn't only occurring in Greece.
The Axial Age. Karl Jasper's concept. One of the most important ideas in the philosophy of history.
Roughly 800 to 200 BCE. A period when multiple civilizations simultaneously developed new forms of consciousness.
Confucius and Laozi in China. The Buddha and the Upanishadic sages in India. The Hebrew prophets in Israel. Zoroaster in Persia. And the Greek philosophers.
All of them independently questioning the inherited mythological frameworks of their cultures.
All of them developing new ways of thinking about the self, ethics, and the nature of reality.
How is this possible? How do multiple civilizations, with limited contact between them, make similar moves at roughly the same time?
There are various theories. Increased trade and cultural contact, exposing people to alternative worldviews, just as happened in Miletus.
The development of writing and literacy. When you can write things down, you can examine them, critique them, compare different accounts, return to them and notice contradictions.
Growing populations and more complex societies. When you have cities instead of villages, you encounter people with different beliefs and practices every day.
The pressure of empire. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians. When you're conquered by foreign powers, your gods seem to have failed you. That creates space for questioning.
Iron Age technology making tools and weapons more widely available, shifting power structures and creating new social possibilities.
But what's really interesting is that different cultures questioned their mythologies in different ways and came to different conclusions.
The Greeks moved toward philosophical rationalism, logos, argument, abstract principle. They asked, what is reality made of? What is the nature of being? How can we know truth?
The Chinese moved toward practical ethics and social harmony. Confucius wasn't particularly interested in metaphysics or cosmology.
He wanted to know how to live well in society, how to govern justly, how to maintain proper relationships between people, how to be a good person in a messy world.
When a student asked Confucius about serving spirits and ghosts, Confucius replied, "You haven't yet learned to serve human beings. How can you serve spirits?"
A pragmatic bracketing of the metaphysical question. Let's focus on what we can know and what we can do in this life, with these people, in these circumstances.
The Taoists took a different approach, Laozi and Zhuangzi. They questioned the artificial constructions of civilization itself.
Confucius wanted to perfect society through ritual and education. The Taoists said society itself might be the problem.
Return to naturalness, Wu Wei, non-action or effortless action. Stop trying to control everything and align yourself with the flow of things.
Which is its own kind of critique of mythology. Not through rational argument, but through a different way of being in the world.
The Indians moved toward interiority. The Upanishads ask, what is the self? What is consciousness? What is the relationship between the individual soul and ultimate reality?
Brahman and Atman, the absolute and the self, and the stunning claim that these are ultimately identical. The deepest truth of the cosmos is the same as the deepest truth of your own being.
That thou art. You are the ultimate reality you're seeking. You just don't recognize it yet.
The Buddha went further. He questioned not just the myths, but the very existence of the self that the Upanishads were examining.
Anatta, no self. What you think of as yourself is a construction, a process, a bundle of changing phenomena, not a thing at all.
And from this insight, he developed a practical methodology for liberation from suffering. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, a complete technology of awakening.
The Hebrews moved toward ethical monotheism. One God, not many. A God who is not part of nature, but transcends it completely.
And crucially, a God concerned with justice and righteousness rather than ritual sacrifice and temple offerings.
The prophets, Amos, Isaiah, Jeremiah, thundering against empty religion. What does God want from you? Not burnt offerings, not elaborate ceremonies.
He wants you to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. He wants you to care for the widow and the orphan. He wants ethical transformation, not religious performance.
A radical ethical demand. The critique of mythology here isn't philosophical or metaphysical, it's moral. The gods of other nations are not just false, they're wicked.
The gods of other nations are petty and capricious. They can be bribed with sacrifices. They play favorites. They commit adultery and murder and lie.
But the God of Israel demands justice, demands that you treat other people as ends in themselves, not means to your purposes, demands that your inner life match your outer performance.
Each of these cultures is critiquing mythology in its own way.
The Greeks reject the gods as explanations for nature.
The Chinese set the gods aside as irrelevant to the real questions of human life.
The Indians transform the gods into aspects of a single underlying reality.
The Hebrews reject the gods as morally inadequate and replace them with ethical monotheism.
So we're not talking about a single event, but a global transformation of human consciousness.
Humanity growing up, in a sense, moving from childhood into adolescence.
And like adolescence, it's messy, painful, full of rebellion against parental authority and confusion about identity.
But also necessary for development. You can't become an adult without going through it.
The question is, what do we do now? Do we stay in permanent rebellion against our heritage? Or can we find a way to integrate what came before with what came after?
This brings us to the core tension. And I think this is where it gets really interesting for us today.
We live in a world that philosophy created. Science, technology, democracy, individual rights, the rule of law, all of these flow from that original Greek move.
The insistence that we can question everything. That truth must be established through evidence and argument, that no authority is beyond criticism.
These are gifts beyond measure. We wouldn't want to give them up. We couldn't give them up even if we wanted to.
And yet,
we're desperately hungry for what mythology provided.
meaning, purpose, connection, the sense that our lives matter in some cosmic way, that we're not just accidents of chemistry in an indifferent universe.
Look at the evidence around us. Record levels of depression and anxiety in the developed world. Epidemic loneliness, despite being more connected than ever through technology.
Suicide rates climbing, especially among young people. Addiction at unprecedented levels, not just to substances, but to screens, to social media, to anything that provides temporary relief from the emptiness.
People turning to conspiracy theories as a kind of degraded mythology. QAnon, flat Earth, the idea that shadowy forces control everything. These are mythological frameworks dressed up in modern clothing.
They provide what mythology always provided: meaning, a sense that you're part of something important, that you have special knowledge, that your life matters in a cosmic battle between good and evil.
Others turning to political ideologies with religious intensity, finding their sense of identity and belonging in partisan warfare. The other side isn't just wrong, they're evil. They must be defeated.
This is mythological consciousness without the wisdom of actual mythology. All the passion and certainty, none of the depth.
Still others turning to consumer culture, trying to fill the void with purchases, experiences, status symbols. The next upgrade, the next vacation, the next thing that might finally make them feel complete.
None of it working? Not really. Not for long. Because what's missing isn't information or entertainment or possessions.
What's missing is participation in something meaningful. The sense that your life is part of a larger story that matters.
The philosopher John Vivek calls this the meaning crisis, the culmination of centuries of disenchantment finally reaching its logical conclusion.
We've explained everything and believed in nothing. We know how the universe works, but not why it matters. We've mastered nature, but lost our souls.
The 20th century philosopher Martin Heidegger talked about this. He said we've forgotten being. We've become so focused on manipulating entities, on controlling and using things, that we've lost touch with the wonder of existence itself.
We can explain how lightning works, every detail of the electrical discharge, the ionization of air, the physics of it. But we can no longer experience its numinous power.
The scientists can tell you the chemical composition of a sunset, the wavelengths of light, the particles in the atmosphere that create those colors. But that knowledge doesn't make the sunset more beautiful. In some ways, it makes it less.
Because now it's just chemistry, just physics, just light refracting through atmosphere. The is has been thoroughly analysed, but the means, the significance has evaporated.
Can meaning even be discovered? Or must it be created from nothing?
This is the existentialist position, isn't it? The universe is indifferent. Meaning is a human projection. We must create our own values from scratch.
Sartre, Camus, Nietzsche before them, staring into the abyss, recognizing that it stares back, and deciding to act anyway.
Which is liberating for some people. Finally, I get to decide what my life means. No one else can tell me.
And terrifying for others. Wait, nothing means anything unless I make it mean something? The responsibility is crushing.
And maybe neither position is quite right.
What do you mean?
Well, the early philosophers assumed that their new method would give them truth. Objective, certain truth that doesn't depend on culture or perspective.
And for a while, especially with the rise of modern science, that seemed to be working.
Newton's physics, the periodic table, evolution, germ theory, genuine knowledge about how the world works, progress that couldn't be denied.
But the 20th century put that confidence under serious strain.
Relativity showed that space and time aren't absolute. They depend on your frame of reference. There's no privileged standpoint from which to observe the universe.
Quantum mechanics revealed a world where particles don't have definite properties until they're observed, where the act of measurement affects what's measured, where causality itself becomes fuzzy.
Gödel's incompleteness theorems proved that any sufficiently complex mathematical system contains truths it cannot prove from within itself. Even mathematics has limits.
The problem of induction. David Hume's old puzzle. We can't actually prove that the future will resemble the past. We just assume it will.
The realization that even our most rigorous methods of inquiry rest on assumptions that cannot themselves be proven.
That logos itself has limits.
So maybe the choice isn't between mythology and philosophy, between mythos and logos.
Maybe we need both, working together, each doing what it does best.
This is something we explore extensively in our work. The tradition draws on both philosophical analysis and mythic structures.
We study primary texts that are philosophical, Plato's Republic, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics,
But also texts that are mythic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Homer's Odyssey, the Popol Vuh.
because each mode of knowing gives us something the other cannot provide.
Philosophy gives us critical thinking, the ability to examine our beliefs, to distinguish good arguments from bad ones, to avoid being deceived by others or by ourselves.
This is essential. Without critical thinking, we're vulnerable to manipulation, to cult leaders and demagogues and advertisers selling us things we don't need.
Myth gives us participation, the sense that our struggles aren't arbitrary, but part of larger patterns, that we're connected to something beyond our individual selves.
When you recognize yourself in Odysseus, struggling to get home against impossible odds, you're not just reading a story, you're finding your own experience reflected in eternal patterns.
And that recognition has power. It can transform how you understand your own life, how you face your own challenges.
The mind dimension of our work, the psychological tools we call keys, these are thoroughly modern in many ways, based on cognitive psychology, neuroscience, the best current understanding of how minds actually function.
But they also draw on ancient wisdom about human psychology. The Stoics knew things about managing emotions that we're only rediscovering now through scientific research.
The Buddhists developed sophisticated maps of mental states that anticipate and often exceed what modern psychology has mapped.
The Confucians understood the power of ritual and habit in shaping character in ways that contemporary behavioral science is confirming.
And the body dimension, the physical practices. These actually predate the philosophical revolution.
Breathwork, movement practices, somatic awareness. The Greeks didn't invent these. They inherited them from older traditions that understood the body's wisdom.
And they didn't abandon them when philosophy emerged. The gymnasium in ancient Greece was a site of both physical and intellectual training.
Socrates wrestled. He served as a hoplite soldier. He didn't separate mind from body the way later philosophers would.
The philosophical schools included physical disciplines alongside the mental ones. Diet, exercise, sleep, all part of the philosophical life.
It's the later tradition that created the sharp split between mind and body, between reason and feeling, between logos and embodied knowing.
Descartes, with his radical dualism. The mind as a ghost in the machine of the body.
And we're still living with that split, still trying to heal it.
One of the things that drew me to this work was exactly this integration. Now, we don't want to use this podcast as a marketing tool for our order, the most ancient amamnetic order of Trikala, as we want this to stand on its own merits for everyone, hence the reason we made this podcast available to everyone last year, not just our members, but as we have had a fair amount of emails asking us for more information about the order and what it does, and considering what we are discussing right now, I feel there is a link. The recognition that genuine transformation requires all three aspects working together.
You can't think your way to wisdom. Understanding a truth intellectually doesn't mean you've embodied it, doesn't mean you can live it.
But you also can't just feel your way there. Emotions without discernment can lead you astray. Good intentions aren't enough.
You need the critical thinking to recognize your own patterns, to question your assumptions, to avoid spiritual bypassing and self-deception.
But you also need the mythic dimension, the stories, the symbols, the sense of participating in something meaningful, larger than yourself.
And you need the body, because ultimately, transformation isn't just a change of mind, it's a change of being. And being is embodied.
When students work through all 15 pillars over 3 to 5 years, they're not just learning about these traditions.
They're embodying them, living them, becoming different through systematic practice.
Think about what that actually means. 15 pillars, each one representing a major wisdom tradition: Greek philosophy, Buddhism, Platonism, Stoicism, Confucianism, Taoism, Vedanta, the mystery traditions, and more.
Each pillar can take more than a year to learn and implement before moving on to the next one. That's not arbitrary. That's how long it takes to actually integrate a new way of being.
Each pillar includes a primary text to study, deep philosophical engagement with a foundational work. Not just reading about it, but actually reading the text itself, wrestling with its arguments, letting it challenge your assumptions.
For the Western pillar, you read Homer's Odyssey. For the Stoic pillar, Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. For the Vedantic pillar, the Bhagavad Gita. Primary sources, not secondary summaries.
Each pillar includes 2 psychological techniques, practical tools for working with the patterns of your own mind.
These aren't vague concepts. They're specific practices with specific steps. You learn them. You practice them daily. You track your progress. You work through the resistance that inevitably arises.
Each pillar includes a progressive physical practice, building somatic awareness and capacity week by week.
Starting with basic breath awareness in the first pillar, then building to walking practice, body scanning, sleep work, posture, cold exposure. Each practice building on what came before.
And each pillar connects to the others, building on what came before, preparing for what comes after.
The architecture is deliberate. The sequence matters. You don't start with the most advanced material. You build foundations first.
It's systematic, which matters, because random exposure to wisdom traditions doesn't produce transformation.
You can read 100 books on Buddhism without becoming any more free from suffering. You can study the Stoics for years and still be buffeted by every emotion.
Information isn't transformation. You need the guidance, the practice, the progression, the integration.
And you need time. Real transformation doesn't happen in a weekend workshop or a 30-day program.
It happens over years of consistent practice. That's why this work can take many years to fully impart. Not because we're trying to string people along, but because that's how long it actually takes to rewire yourself at the deepest level.
Let's talk about what was actually lost when philosophy emerged, because I think there's a tendency to treat this as pure progress.
The triumph of reason over superstition.
Light conquering darkness.
And that narrative is deeply misleading.
Consider what myth provided. First, emotional resonance. The stories didn't just explain the world. They moved people, connected with their deepest fears and hopes and longings.
When you heard Homer performed, you wept, you cheered, you felt the tragedy of Hector's death, the longing of Odysseus for home. These weren't just stories. They were your own life reflected back at you in larger form.
The myths gave words to experiences that otherwise couldn't be expressed. The terror of mortality, the mystery of love, the anguish of loss, the hope for redemption.
A purely rational account of reality doesn't do that. You can understand the physics of a sunset without feeling anything. You can explain death in biological terms without touching the grief.
Second, community binding. Shared myths create shared identity. When everyone knows the same stories, participates in the same rituals, honors the same gods, you have social cohesion.
You belong to something larger than yourself, not abstractly but concretely, through shared practice, through being part of a community that gathers for festivals, that marks the seasons together, that celebrates and mourns together.
Philosophy is individual. You reason your own way to conclusions. This is liberating, but also isolating.
Each philosopher can reach different conclusions. Socrates thought one thing, Aristotle another, and without shared ritual, shared story, what holds the community together?
This is one reason why modern societies feel so fragmented. We've lost the shared stories that used to bind us. We don't have rituals that bring us together across political and social divides.
Third, ritual participation. Mythological cultures had practices, ways of enacting the stories, making them real through embodied activity.
You didn't just hear about Demeter's grief. You fasted during the mysteries. You walked in procession. You descended into darkness and emerged into light. Your body knew the story.
Philosophy is largely passive. You think, you read, you argue, but you don't necessarily do anything with your body.
The great mystery traditions, Eleusis and others, offered direct experience, initiation, transformation through participation, not just understanding. People who went through these initiations reported that their lives were changed forever.
And we don't really know what happened in those mysteries. The initiates kept the secret, but we know it involved fasting, purification, procession, and some kind of direct revelation.
Philosophy mostly abandoned this, became about ideas rather than practices, about knowing rather than being transformed.
Fourth, and this might be the most important, mythology made meaning feel discovered rather than constructed.
When you live inside a myth, you don't experience yourself as making things up. The meaning is out there, in the cosmos, in the nature of reality.
Philosophy introduces the terrible possibility that meaning is something we project onto an indifferent universe.
And once you've seen that possibility, you can never quite unsee it.
You're always aware that you might be wrong, that the meaning you find might be just something you invented to make yourself feel better.
The German sociologist Max Weber called this an iron cage. Modern rationality traps us in a world where everything can be explained, but nothing ultimately matters.
The Romantics tried to escape this. Go back to nature, recover feeling and intuition, reject the cold rationalism of the Enlightenment.
Wordsworth, Coleridge, Blake, Rousseau before them, the idea that civilization corrupts and we need to return to something more natural.
But you can't really go back. Once you've developed critical consciousness, you can't unknow it.
You can pretend to believe what you don't believe, but it's not the same as actual belief.
The existentialists tried to make peace with meaninglessness. Accept that meaning is constructed. Take responsibility for creating your own values.
Sartre's radical freedom. You are condemned to be free. There is no essence preceding existence. You must create yourself through your choices.
But that can feel like such thin gruel compared to the rich feast of mythological consciousness.
It puts enormous pressure on the individual. You must make meaning for yourself alone, without any cosmic support.
More recently, we've seen attempts to recover the mythic through what's sometimes called the New Age movement.
Crystals and astrology and spirit guides, past life regression and channeling.
Often dismissed as nonsense by the educated mainstream.
And some of it probably is nonsense. There's a lot of charlatanism and wishful thinking.
But the hunger these movements respond to is real. People need something that philosophy alone cannot provide.
And here's what I think is interesting. The most sophisticated versions of this recovery don't reject philosophy. They try to integrate it.
Carl Jung is a good example. He took the mythic seriously as psychology. The archetypes, the collective unconscious, the hero's journey as a pattern of psychological development.
But he was also scientifically trained, a medical doctor, a careful observer. He didn't think Zeus literally threw thunderbolts.
He thought the myth of Zeus expressed something about human psychology, about the experience of power, authority, the father archetype, about how we relate to overwhelming force in our lives.
These patterns are real in their effects, even if they're not real in a physical sense. The hero archetype shapes how people actually behave. The shadow influences our choices, whether we acknowledge it or not.
Jung argued that the myths weren't just made up. They emerged from the collective unconscious, from deep structures of the human psyche that we all share.
When you dream of a wise old man or a dangerous descent into darkness, you're tapping into patterns that billions of humans have experienced. The myths are the cultural expression of these universal patterns.
Joseph Campbell continued this approach, finding the universal patterns in mythology, showing how the same basic stories appear across cultures.
His book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, mapped the monomyth, the single story that underlies all hero stories, from Odysseus to Buddha to Luke Skywalker.
Not because there was one original myth that spread everywhere, but because these patterns reflect something about the structure of human consciousness itself, about how we actually grow and change.
The hero's journey isn't just a story type, it's a map of psychological transformation.
The call to adventure. Something disrupts your ordinary world. Something summons you to change.
Refusal of the call, the initial resistance. Who am I to undertake this? I'm comfortable where I am.
Crossing the threshold. The commitment to change. Leaving the known world behind.
Tests, allies, and enemies. The challenges that forge you. The helpers who appear. The obstacles that seem impossible.
The ordeal. The death. The moment when everything falls apart and you have to face your deepest fear.
The reward, the gift, the new capacity that emerges from the ordeal.
The road back. Integrating what you've gained. Bringing it back to ordinary life.
Every human being goes through versions of this journey multiple times in life. Every major life transition follows this pattern.
And recognizing the pattern can help you navigate it. When you're in the ordeal phase, when everything seems to be falling apart, knowing that this is part of the journey can give you the courage to continue.
But here's where it connects to actual practice. Because knowing about the hero's journey is one thing, actually undergoing it is another.
This is something we emphasize constantly. The difference between intellectual understanding and embodied knowing.
You can read Campbell and think, oh yes, the hero's journey, how interesting, and then go back to your regular life unchanged.
Or you can actually undertake the journey. Face the threshold guardians. Descend into the underworld. Die to who you were and be reborn as who you're becoming.
Philosophy can help you understand what's happening. Myth provides the pattern. Practice makes it real.
This is why the work we do integrates all three dimensions.
The spirit dimension gives you the philosophical framework, the understanding, the ability to think critically about what you're doing and why.
Through 15 traditions studied over multiple years. Greek philosophy, Buddhist psychology, Stoic ethics, Taoist wisdom, Confucian cultivation, Vedantic insight.
The mind dimension gives you practical tools, techniques for working with your actual psychological patterns, 2 keys per pillar, specific methods for shifting how your mind operates,
Based on modern understanding of how minds function, but drawing on ancient wisdom about human nature.
and the body dimension grounds it all. Progressive physical practices, starting with breath awareness, building through walking and posture and movement.
Because transformation that doesn't reach the body isn't complete. Your nervous system has to change. Not just your beliefs.
Let me return to the Greeks for a moment, because I want to highlight something often missed about the original philosophical revolution.
What's that?
The early philosophers weren't rejecting everything about mythology. They were rejecting specific claims about the causes of natural phenomena.
Thales wasn't saying that community doesn't matter, or that meaning is an illusion, or that embodied practice is worthless.
He was saying that if you want to understand what happens during a storm, looking for natural causes is more productive than appealing to Zeus.
It was a methodological move more than a total metaphysical revolution.
And the later tradition, especially the Stoics and the Epicureans, maintained deep interest in how to live well, not just how to think correctly.
Stoicism in particular. Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing abstract philosophy for academic publication.
He was writing practical instructions for himself, how to maintain equanimity in the face of difficulty, how to respond to insult and injury, how to face death, how to live well.
And those instructions often retain a mythic quality. The Stoic conception of the cosmos as a living, rational whole. Providence, fate, the idea of playing your assigned role in the cosmic drama.
Epictetus, who was himself a freed slave, spoke constantly of accepting what's given while working with what depends on you.
There's deep wisdom in that. Ancient wisdom. Not just logical analysis, but guidance for the soul.
Philosophy, at its best, was never purely abstract. It was always concerned with transformation.
Plato's allegory of the cave isn't just a theory of knowledge, it's a description of awakening.
Emerging from illusion into reality, and that emergence is painful. The light blinds you at first. You want to go back to the comfortable darkness.
It takes courage to keep climbing toward the light.
Aristotle said the purpose of studying ethics isn't to know what virtue is, but to become virtuous.
Not knowledge for its own sake. Knowledge in service of transformation. In service of becoming what you're capable of becoming.
This is the strand of philosophy that we try to continue, the practical, transformational strand.
Philosophy is a way of life rather than an academic discipline.
Pierre Hadot, The French philosopher wrote beautifully about this. He showed how ancient philosophy was always embedded in practice.
Haddo spent decades studying the ancient philosophical schools, and he discovered something that modern academic philosophy had forgotten.
For the ancients, philosophy wasn't primarily about producing arguments or theories. It was about transforming yourself, about becoming a different kind of person.
The Stoics didn't just argue about the nature of emotions, they practiced specific exercises to master their emotions. Daily reflection, evening review, the view from above, where you imagine yourself looking down on the earth from a great height.
The Epicureans didn't just theorize about pleasure and pain. They lived in communities designed to maximize friendship and simple pleasures. They practiced gratitude. They contemplated death to appreciate life.
The Platonists didn't just debate the theory of forms, they practiced contemplation. They used mathematics and geometry as spiritual exercises. They sought to ascend from the visible world to the intelligible world through disciplined thought.
Spiritual exercises. That's what Haddo called them. Daily practices that transformed the practitioner.
Contemplation of death. The Stoics called it memento mori. Remember that you will die, not to be morbid, but to clarify what really matters.
Attention to the present moment. What we now call mindfulness was thoroughly practiced in the ancient world. The discipline of attention. Being fully present to what is happening right now.
Examination of conscience. Every evening, reviewing the day. What did I do well? Where did I fall short? How can I do better tomorrow?
These techniques that modern people often associate with Eastern traditions were fully present in the Greek and Roman world. We just forgot about them.
Somewhere along the way, Western philosophy lost this practical dimension, became abstract, academic, concerned with arguments rather than transformation.
The medieval universities transformed philosophy from a way of life into an academic subject. Something you study for examinations, not something you live.
And that split has continued to the present day. Academic philosophers write papers that other academic philosophers read, but very few of them are actually transformed by their studies.
Which is fine for academic purposes, but it means that people seeking actual transformation had to look elsewhere. To Buddhism, to yoga, to new religious movements, to therapy.
Which is why recovering this practical dimension of Western philosophy matters. We have our own traditions of transformation. They're just buried.
And turning only to Eastern traditions, while valuable, can mean cutting yourself off from your own heritage.
The wisdom traditions of the West, Greek philosophy, Stoicism, Neoplatonism, the mystery traditions, these are available to us, if we know how to access them.
And they have something unique to offer, something that complements the Eastern traditions, rather than duplicating them.
The emphasis on reason, on argument, on critical thinking. These are Greek gifts to humanity.
The Eastern traditions sometimes bypass critical thinking. Trust the teacher, absolutely. Don't question the tradition, just practice.
Which can work. But it can also lead to spiritual authoritarianism, to cults, to manipulation.
The philosophical method provides a check on that. It gives you tools for evaluating claims, for questioning authority, including spiritual authority.
As we come toward the end of today's exploration, I want to leave you with something to consider.
A question rather than an answer.
What myths are you living inside right now?
Because everyone lives inside stories, even people who think they're purely rational.
The story of progress. Things are getting better all the time. Science and technology will solve our problems eventually.
Or the story of decline. Things are getting worse. The modern world is a mistake. We need to go back to something simpler.
The story of individual achievement. Your value depends on your accomplishments. Success is measured by status and wealth.
Or the story of victimhood. You're oppressed by forces beyond your control. Others are to blame for your situation.
These are all mythologies. Stories that structure how we perceive reality.
None of them are simply true. All of them capture something while distorting something else.
The philosophical capacity allows you to see that you're inside a story, to step back and examine it critically.
But it doesn't remove the need for story. You can't live without narrative. The human mind makes meaning through story.
So the question becomes, which stories are you going to inhabit? And how consciously are you going to inhabit them?
This is what transformation work involves. Becoming aware of your current mythology, examining it critically, deciding what serves your flourishing and what doesn't.
And then, consciously, choosing to inhabit stories that support your development.
Not naively, not pretending they're literally true in some scientific sense.
But participatively, allowing them to shape your perception, guide your action, connect you to meaning.
The birth of philosophy gave us the tools to examine our myths,
The wisdom traditions, properly understood, give us better myths to inhabit.
and practice makes it real.
That's the integration we're working toward.
Next time, we're going to explore what happened after the Milesians, the philosophical tradition they started and where it led.
The crisis of being. The problem of change and permanence. Heraclitus and his dark sayings about flux and fire.
Parmenides and his stunning claim that change is impossible, that everything we perceive is illusion.
And the extraordinary debates between them that shaped all subsequent Western thought.
But before we go, we want to hear from you.
What resonated today? What challenged you? What questions came up?
We genuinely want to know. This isn't a one-way transmission. It's a conversation across time and space.
Send your thoughts to podcast@maaoot.org.
That's podcast@maaoot.org.
And actually, we want to say thank you. We've been receiving emails from listeners, and they're wonderful. Thoughtful questions, personal reflections, challenges to things we've said.
We read every single one. And we've decided we're going to start reading some of them out at the end of each episode.
So if you have a question, a reflection, something you want us to explore, send it in. You might hear it on a future episode.
Your questions and reflections genuinely shape what we explore here.
And if today's conversation sparked something deeper, if you're feeling that hunger we talked about, if you're wondering what systematic work might look like,
visit maaoot.org, explore what's available, see if something resonates.
ab immemorabili, from time beyond memory.
The questions the ancient philosophers asked are still alive,
The myths they questioned still shape us.
and the integration they pioneered is still unfolding.
In us, through us, beyond us.
Until next time,
Keep questioning.
keep wondering.
Keep becoming.